Today's reading comes from the Gospel of John in the 8th chapter. Early in the morning, he returned to the temple. All the people gathered around him and sat down and taught him. The legal experts and Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery. Placing her in the center of the group, they said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of committing adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone women like this. What do you say?" They said this to test him, because they wanted a reason to bring an accusation against him. Jesus bent down and wrote on the ground with his finger. They continued to question him, so he stood up and replied, "Whoever hasn't sinned should throw the first stone." Bending down again, he wrote on the ground. Those who heard him went away, one by one, beginning with the elders. Finally, only Jesus and the woman were left in the middle of the crowd. Jesus stood up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Is there no one to condemn you?" She said, "No one, sir." Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, don't sin anymore."
Excuse me. Some Bible stories have a bit of a strange history if you dive into them. For example, if you look at the earliest manuscripts of John's Gospel, this story that we've heard is not always there. What I find fascinating about that is we've all heard this story probably many times before. In some places, the story shows up later, or even in a different gospel entirely. For a long time, people have wondered whether it was part of John's original writing or a story about Jesus that was passed down and found its way into the text. The reason it may have been left out at times is interesting to me because this is a story that disrupts things. It complicates our desire for clear lines between right and wrong, guilty and innocent. It refuses easy judgment. And even with all that uncertainty, the church kept holding on to this story. It kept being told and retold as if something in this story was too important to lose. I think that's right, because this is exactly the kind of story we need today. In today's story, a woman is dragged into public view. She is accused, exposed, and surrounded. The text tells us what she is up against, but it doesn't give us her voice. It doesn't give us her name. We don't hear her speak. We only know the weight of what is about to happen to her. And it's easy, I think, to imagine those in the crowd as the villains. But I really think that's too simple. These are religious people, people who care about the law, people who believe that what they are doing is right, people who are certain. And they're holding stones. And that's when the story begins to get uncomfortable because we recognize something in these people. But first, Jesus bends down. He doesn't rush in. He doesn't argue immediately. He writes in the dust a strange, quiet act that has puzzled people for centuries. What is he writing? We don't know. And maybe that's the point. Maybe it just interrupts what is happening. It slows everything down. It creates just enough space for something else to emerge. And then he says, let anyone among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone. This is not a denial of wrongdoing or a dismissal of accountability, but a turning of the question. And one by one, they leave. The oldest first. And I've always loved that detail, maybe because the longer you live, the harder it is to pretend that you are without fault. The longer you live, the more you know your own stories. And in the end, it's just Jesus and the woman. Neither do I condemn you, he says. Go your way, and from now on, do not sin again. Through the centuries, this story has often been interpreted as a lesson in mercy, and I think that's right. It has been told as a warning against judgment, and it's that as well. But sometimes we hear this story in a way that keeps it safely in the past, as if it's about those people back then. But this is a story that is always happening. See, we are living in a time when the stakes feel high. We are in a time of war, a time of rising nationalism, a time when the lines between us and them are being drawn more sharply every day. It can feel like everyone is being handed a stone and being told exactly who deserves them. And this happens anytime we gather with certainty in our hands. Anytime we decide we know who is right and who is wrong. Anytime we stop listening. Anytime we begin to believe that the only way forward is for someone else to lose. And I want to say something plainly to you this morning. Because I have grown over these past 4 years to love this church. And I believe in who we are called to be. And so today I am going to be incredibly vulnerable with you. See, I have heard the ways that we talk about one another when we have conversations about the well-being of this church. I see how quickly we become entrenched in our opinions and positions, how each of us carries a vision of how things should be, and how hard it is to loosen our grip on that. And more than that, I've heard the way that some talk about leaving the church. If they make this change, I don't know if I will stay, I've heard. If things don't go this way, I'm out. Those words matter. They matter because they turn our shared life into something conditional and transactional. And so underneath it all, I wonder if what we're really holding on to are stones. Not literal stones, but the stones of certainty. The stones of frustration, the stones of I'm right, the stones of they just don't get it. And once we're holding those stones, it becomes very hard to listen to each other, very hard to stay open, very hard to love one another. And I want to say too that I'm not standing apart from this. I feel it in myself too, a tightening in my chest when things get tense. The pull toward certainty, the frustration, even the anxiety when temperatures rise. I know how easy it is to pick up a stone and not even realize I'm holding it. So I find myself coming back to Jesus in this moment. Not standing over the crowd, not shaming them, but bending down, slowing things down. And then offering a question. let anyone among you who is without sin. In other words, before you throw, look within. Before you condemn, tell the truth about your own heart. Before you walk away, ask what it means to stay. What would it look like for us to be that kind of community? A community where we take our convictions seriously, but hold them with humility. A community where disagreement doesn't lead to division. A community where we resist the urge to weaponize our frustration. A community where staying matters more than winning. You see, the gospel does not call us to uniformity, it calls us to relationship. It calls us to the hard, holy work of being with one another, especially when it's uncomfortable, especially when we don't see things the same way, especially when it would be easier to walk away. This is accountability and transformation, both individually and together as one church family. It begins not with condemnation, but with grace, not with stones, but with open hands. So the invitation for us this week is simple, not easy, but simple. I invite you to notice the stones you're carrying, to name them, and little by little, to let them fall. To choose curiosity over certainty. To choose listening over winning. To choose presence over departure. And to trust that something sacred can still happen among us, not because we all agree, but because we are willing to stay, to listen, and to be changed. In the end, that's where Jesus is. Not with the crowd holding stones, but in the spaces that open when those stones are set down. Will you set down your stones with me today? Will you set down your stones with me today? May we be open to that together.